The social principles of Christianity preach cowardice, self-contempt, abasement, submissiveness, and humbleness. That's what Karl Marx says. And then there's this: if any civilization is to survive, it is the morality of altruism that men have to reject. Anybody know who said that one? Ayn Rand. Yeah, imagine that. Boo. Yeah, Ayn Rand. Political philosopher and inspiration for neoconservatives. And you know what? They're right. They're right. In some respect, both Karl Marx and Ayn Rand. Because using the words of Jesus that we heard just a few moments ago, the church, or at least many in the church, have preached and have directed people, or actually, let's be a little bit more specific, certain groups of people often, to turn the other cheek. To think of others, even abusers, before themselves, to, as I have been called or used to be doormats for people to just run over us. Even in our translation of that gospel text, you see, I don't know if you noticed where it's, and I like Will Gaffney's translation often, but she said, "Do not set yourself against the wicked." I don't know if you were reading along, you might have noticed I changed it. Using a different translation, a different commentator points out that the Greek there, in so many other places, it actually uses and is translated warfare, fight. It's more violent. But in this instance, a lot of our translations basically say do not resist. Whereas the Greek is often used and translated in more of a violently way. And so this commentator suggests that it actually should more accurately be translated. Do not violently resist the evil one. But in so many of our translations, they cut out the violent and say, just don't resist. Why? So Karl Marx, Ayn Rand, well, they're not wrong. But they're not right either. They're not. Because there is another way to hear the words of Jesus. To hear these words. To hear them, perhaps, as the people who left their homes to walk to the lakefront. Those who left the fields, left their towns to follow Jesus, to stand and sit in the fields, how they might have heard Jesus. So in order for us to help us hear how those first Christians, those first followers, that first church might have heard Jesus, I'll need some help. Bill, can you come up here? Bill, come on up here. And, all right, Jim, go ahead and read that line.
But when someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other to them also.
Okay, Bill, go ahead. Hit my right cheek.
So you want me to be like a bully?
Yes. You're a bigger man than me. Oh, wow! Oh, my goodness. Okay, I got that right cheek here.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No. We're not talking to dodging here. Okay, I did do kickboxing. Oh,
No.
you can't do that.
Not gonna work.
You can't hit. He cannot hit my right cheek with his right hand. He would need to use a left hook. This is called a left hook. Yeah.
Which I won't do.
You won't do that. No, because I will pop you one right back. No. So, yeah, you would have to use your left hand to punch me on the right cheek. Okay. Problem is, back in the world that we're talking about, back in the day, the left hand wasn't used for a lot of things. Anybody know the word sinister? That's actually Latin for left. So all you lefties
Sinister?
are sinister. So, in the Roman culture, oops, I knew I picked the right guy. In the Roman culture and the Middle East culture, the left hand wasn't really used for a lot of things. This is, the time before Charmin and other things. And so, and it was water, but, try to keep things cleaner. So this was used for dealing with a lot of stuff, and this was reserved for other things. It got used for other things too, but just so. So if you are going to hit my right cheek, how are you going to do that? Go ahead and give that a whirl.
I can't do my
You
life.
you can't really, don't.
Right.
You can't
Well,
punch
we
me.
ruled that out.
We ruled that out, so, yeah. So you would have to, see that? You know what that is? That's a backhand. And unfortunately, a backhanded slap is often something that not you, but people would do to someone who is inferior to them. Children, slaves, women often get a backhand. You can go ahead and have a seat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Come to church, you never know what you're going to get asked to do. So those first listeners of Jesus, they're like, oh, when someone hits me on the right cheek, they're automatically probably thinking, oh, I'm getting backhanded. Okay. Actually, Billy, I don't need to back up. I forgot to show the rest of this. See, that's what happens when you leave your paper off the screen. So they're thinking, of the situation that a lot of them were probably in, with superiors who would backhand them. Okay. So you backhand me. Go ahead and backhand me. Now Jesus says, turn the other cheek. Now I go like this. Try and backhand me again. Try and backhand me again. Okay, yeah. So actually, when you turn the other cheek, you make it hard to have that backhand happen. Again, he's going to hit my nose. Might hurt his hand more. Look at this thing. This is going to do some damage, this one. So you can't actually, by turning the other cheek, you're not allowing yourself to be backhanded again. So what you would have to do, so if I turn the other cheek, okay, you can't backhand me. Yeah. But you could do that. You could pop me one now. Which actually is, in a sense, saying you can now fight me like a man. Okay. Treat me like an equal and hit me with a punch instead of a backhand. It's not necessarily saying, oh, please hit my other cheek, because, I like that. It's a way of saying, I'm not going to let you demean me with a backhand.
Is it like a dare?
Dare. Or it's at least saying, you know what, if you're going to hit me, you got to hit me with a fist. You got to treat me as an equal and not backhand me like an inferior. Okay. So this isn't, hey, hit the other side too, because that's so nice. No, that's not it. Now, thank you, Billy. Thank you. We can clap for Bill again. Yes. Yeah. So yes, that backhand and forcing to turn the other cheek, it's a very specific situation, and the folks listening to Jesus could orient and understand that. Now, the second thing we have, Jesus says, and I do actually in this instance really appreciate Dr. Gaffney's translation, because it includes the word court or judgment, the idea of a judgment. It's not someone just asking for your coat. And what the first listeners of Jesus would hear is when someone wants you to be judged and take your coat, let your other clothing go as well. So if you're in court, someone takes you to court, and the judgment is, well, give them your coat, it probably means there's not much more else that you can give. Because you can't give them your gold, your Roman coins, obviously, because you probably don't have them. So if the judgment is, well, since you have nothing more to give, because you're so poor, give your accuser, or give the one who's suing you, this is like a suit, give them your coat. Well, what Jesus says is, well, give them the rest of your clothing too, and we're not going to demonstrate that here. We just use your imagination. Well, use your imagination, but not too much. So what Jesus says, give them the rest of your clothing. And it's not because Jesus thinks that your accuser or the person suing you needs your shirt and your underwear, but that means you are standing there in the court, whatever that is, the courtyard, you're standing there in that public place naked. Your nakedness is there for all to see, to say, look, this guy sued me, someone who's so poor, took my coat, and now here I am, naked. That nakedness can be a form of protest. It shows how absurd, how mean-spirited it is for someone who has nothing other than the clothes on their back, for someone to take them to court and sue them or judge against them. So that nakedness that Jesus is telling the folks to do if they have to, can be seen as a way to protest the injustice of that situation, of a world where the poor are going to be asked to give up their outer garment. Oh, go ahead, take the rest. It's so terrible. Now, we might also not get that being forced to walk a mile thing. Okay, you should walk a mile, but I shouldn't have to force you. But back in the day, the people listening to Jesus knew what he was referring to. You see, the Roman armies, soldiers that occupied Palestine, were allowed by Roman law to force anyone, usually the peasants in the field or whatever, people in the town, to carry the Roman soldiers' equipment for 1 mile. Because these armies had to march a lot, and for them to really move it, the soldiers would be worn out if they had to carry their own gear, because they didn't have Humvees and all that other stuff. So the Roman law was you could force someone to carry your gear for 1 mile, and that's it. By continuing to walk, as Jesus said, well, let's go the other mile. Perhaps the people, the peasants, put the Roman soldier in a difficult position, because at that point, he needed to get his stuff back. And so he needed to ask. So if I had Jim, you've been carrying my stuff, and you keep going, and I'm the soldier, and I'm like, if he carries it more, I can be in trouble. So I need to say, hey, Jim, give me my stuff back, please. Please, Jim, give me my stuff. Stop walking. Please give me my stuff back. Okay. So you see what's happening here? It's not just, just walk another mile. It's, in a sense, it's trying to move the person who's been forced to carry from a position of powerlessness to actually more power. Yes, is that a question?
It is a question.
Yes.
The way you're explaining this feels like this is the ground text for nonviolent resistance.
Yes, it is. You get a gold star. No, thank you. You're right. That is. It really is. It can be. It really can be. But you know what? The church hasn't taught that, preached it all that much. It's a lot of work to get to explain this. And we don't always think in terms of first century culture and all of that. And this is an interpretation, by the way. Others may not agree with it. But yeah, it is very much, as I read it, a way to encourage us to non-violently resist. So instead of Jesus just telling those first century men and women from the towns and the villages and the farms to just give in, give up, Jesus is giving them ways to kind of resist. Not violently, like you said, but ways to kind of move from perpetual victimization and powerlessness to some type of dignity, some level of agency, some power. So no, following Christianity is not just simple altruism, doing whatever. It's not an opiate for us to just roll over and take it. It's not just to make us all meek and mild, a bunch of doormats. We do not need, though, to resort to violence. We can love in other ways. Jesus is giving us here, I think, an example, because we can't apply that in our world, really. The world's changed, but gives us the power to be creative in our resistance. To, in a sense, not let ourselves become our own worst enemies. Because all too often, that's what we can be, our own worst enemy. Because too many voices in the church have taken Jesus' words at face value, and like I said, applied them in ways that are, I think, inconsistent with the overall picture of a God who liberates and favors the oppressed. The church has told slaves, obey your master. Women and those abused, go ahead, turn the other cheek. Love, but not explain how you can love and still love yourself. The church has endorsed state and institutional violence and oppression. So hearing these words, even without a preacher sermonizing on this, though, you can think that as well. Too many women and others have simply allowed themselves to become victims, punching bags, literally, for the powerful and abusers. We become our own worst enemy as individuals and sometimes as the church. We've forgotten that we're all created in the image of God. And we've sadly only seen two options: submit or violence. Very limiting. We've missed too many opportunities to preach and teach and live Jesus' creative resistance. As I said, we've been our own worst enemies. But no longer. With those words, we can hear that to love one another, to love all, even our own enemies, is to love ourselves as well. To include ourselves in that love as all God's beloved. Amen.